Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Metal Command podcast. Tony here with you, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Tim Hansen of the band Induction. That's a power metal band from Europe. They're pretty much a new band for the most part. This is their second album. Their debut album came out in 2019, but this album, I'm telling you right now, folks, is one of the best power metal albums I have ever heard in my entire life. I've been listening to heavy metal music for over 30 years now. I have done this show for 25 years, and this is one of the best records I think I have ever heard. And I want to give a big shout out to Pete Seelig of Iron Savior, who has been a friend of the show for 25 years. He came on my radio show from the first year I've done it, all throughout the entire time I've done it. And he did tell me about this band. Now, he is Tim Hansen's godfather, and Tim, of course, is the son of Kai Hansen, who obviously played guitar and founded Gamma Ray, and of course plays in Helloween yet again, and was also one of the founding members of that band as well. So this is his son. Now, does it sound like Gamma Ray or Helloween? Not really. They have their own sound, which is one of the reasons I like them. But more importantly, folks, the heavy metal genre, you're going to have a lot of these legacy bands retiring maybe in the next 10, 15 years. And I think it's important to really jump on some of these younger bands that are putting out killer music. And that's what this is. So, folks, I tell you, you have to check this album out. It is one of the best power metal albums I have ever heard. And with that said, here's the interview with myself and Tim Hansen of Induction. We'll start it off here. Well, Tim, welcome to the Metal Command show for the first time. And I'm going to be honest with you. You have put out an album that has completely blown me away. And I'm going to start this off by telling you the reason I know of you or heard of the band is I've known Pete Seelig from Iron Savior for about 25 years now. And the last time that we spoke, he goes, "You have to check out this band Induction." He goes, "I'm telling you." He goes, "This is probably one of the best power metal bands that probably exists right now." And typically for me, the best recommendations for bands has always been word of mouth. And he wasn't exaggerating. Actually, the album was a lot better than I thought it would be. In fact, I haven't stopped listening to it since I've gotten it. But I'll be honest with you, in the last 20 some years, I haven't really been into a lot of power metal bands. And most of the bands that would come out, I mean, some of them were pretty good. They were okay, but this is a lot different for me than a lot of the other bands I've heard over the last 15. And when I say other bands, I'm talking about newer bands. I'm not talking about like, Gamma Ray or Helloween or anybody, but newer bands definitely. And talk about this album, man, because I'll be honest with you, it's the songwriting. I mean, the production. When you have Jacob Hansen doing an album, it's going to sound good, but the songwriting, everything. Talk about this new album. Talk about getting this band together and really getting to where you're at right now, because I think this record is amazing.
Well, first things first, thanks for having me, and thanks for these great words. You're indeed right. Pete is my godfather, actually, and he did some additional choirs as well as some like spoken parts in the album. It's super cool to hear him talk about us like that. And then I always felt that word of mouth is the best promotion that people can get. So you're totally right on that. It's just great to see that people are like convinced and they're excited for it. So you're right. We did the production with Jacob, and that's inevitably going to sound great. That's a different decision than we made on the first record. The first record we did with Eike, who's not only a longtime friend, but also a producer that, we've been working with on the first album. Mm-hmm. But this time around, we wanted to do it with Jacob because he has this more modern mixing style, and I think it turned out quite well. That it's just like a more massive overall sound that I think serves the songs really well. And what else you want to know? Like, hit me with all the questions.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned he has this kind of more modern sound, and that was one of the
Yeah.
things that struck me is, you know, the band that, like, a long time ago, the band that really blew my mind when they came out is was Ed Guy. This was like the
Mhm.
late 90s. And the thing is, I notice a lot of that same drive and positivity, you can call it, from you guys, you know, when you're promoting the album online, when you're talking about it. And they, to me, were like the new power metal band that really was going to go places. And then obviously, you know, Avantasia
Okay.
exists, and I think you guys are like pretty much there. I mean, because I listened to this, and when you talked about a modern sound, that's exactly what it reminds me of.
Mhm.
It's a power metal band. You have kind of that spirit of the older bands that came before you, but it's a lot more modern sounding, and that is probably the best way to describe your album, at least to me.
Yeah, nice. I mean, you're right. Like we do, we're as well. We're super excited about this record, of course. Like we knew when we got the master that we had something quite special there, and um, of course we went out to like promote it a lot, and we are super excited. And then when it finally came out, it was great to see just how many people actually loved it, and how many new people actually got to hear about it as well. So what we kind of aimed for was, or like what I kind of aimed for in this production was that we um, go for like yeah, it's hard to tell actually, but what I tried to go for, I wanted to have like a very massive drum that was very important to me, and make sure that it's just super fun to listen to, if that makes sense, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I actively made decisions throughout the production where I felt like, okay, doing this as opposed to this will make the song more fun, you know. And I think you can hear that on the final results. And yeah, it just adds to the experience where you know, you can sit in your car, you can pump up the mix very loud if you
Yeah.
want to, and just sing along. And that's always what I kind of thought music is about.
Sure.
You know, because it's not about, you know, technical shredding and all this stuff, which of course also is fun and which I also love doing, and which is also on the record. But it's about having fun and combining all these aspects. I think that's where a metal record really can shine. Um,
Yeah, you know, and it's interesting you say that, because power metal, that's really what it is. If you look at most bands, power metal bands like yourselves, you know, maybe even some of the older bands, I mean, you go to their shows and you listen to the albums, that's really what it does. It's kind of like one of those albums you can listen to for 45 minutes to an hour, you know, however long it actually is, and kind of forget about your problems for that time period. It kind of, you know, because I listen to it when I'm working and I have a work truck and the speakers aren't the greatest. I still thought it sounded really good, you know. So, but it kind of, you know, again, music is one of those things. It's like an escape, and this is a record that, when you say it's fun to listen to, I'd agree. You know, because a lot of power metal bands that are very good, they have these songs that you'll listen to them and you get that kind of vibe. Like Queen of the Light would be a song I could think of, and Go to Hell. Those two songs,
yeah,
like I could see you playing those live, and those would be like, you know, every band has that song that the
yeah.
crowd really gets into more than the other ones. Those two remind me of that.
Which is funny. The longest song on the record, "Scorched."
Mhm.
You know it. It's like a 7 minute song, and it was kind of a bold move from us to just put it in the second spot on the album. But I felt like, okay, I don't know, it's just so good. The riff just gets me going, and now in a live situation, I was actually surprised how this song was the strongest from all the songs. You know,
Yeah.
people jumped every time. So really quite cool to see how some songs just work differently in a live setting. And Yeah, I think I'm Alive is also another one in that direction, like really more straightforward and fun to sing along to.
Now, being a younger band, has it been difficult for you guys, because touring, a lot of the stuff that bands have to deal with now, as far as the cost of touring, you have to deal with, you have to deal with a lot of stuff, a lot of obstacles, merchandise. You're waiting forever for that to get printed. Have you run into a lot of that stuff, and how have you gotten through that?
Mhm. Well, I think most of the difficulties that we do have are in like logistical nature. So um, our singer who's from England and then Marcos who's from Tenerife, I mean, that obviously is a challenge to get things going for a live show. Um, so yeah, we do have like a pretty high cost initially to do or to play live, because we just have to fly them in and then rehearse, and it's just a bit more than it would be for like a fully local band, but it's still doable. But currently the hardest thing is actually just that there's a big traffic jam going on of concerts still from COVID, and the festivals and bookers, they're still booking some of the biggest bands that are waiting for their shows from COVID to be played. So I think this will still take time to resolve. Let's give it another 2 years or whatever, and then it will look much better again, I believe. But then one other downside that we got from COVID was that actually all the bus companies that rent the tour buses, they got totally fucked. If I can say that. But well, there's just much less companies out there and they're more expensive now. So yeah, that's obviously a problem as well for smaller bands to go and do tours.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I have a podcast coming out about that. And the one thing about buses.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know.
Yeah. Well, one thing about buses is that, number one, let's say those things cost like $1 million, right? To you had that, these companies,
they're crazy expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, these companies were paying those payments even when nobody was using them, and now they're trying to make that up. So your bus that would cost $1,000 to $1,500 a day now costs $2,500 to $3,000 a day, if you can even find one. And that is a problem for a lot of bands. It was funny. We were talking about transportation was one of the biggest problems for a tour. And then since bands can't afford that, they might get like Mercedes Sprinter vans, and then you can't get those because then everybody that can't afford the bus is going to get those, and those went up.
And then also those buses, I mean, those also got more expensive, and then it's also just a safety concern because you don't want to be on a like serious tour where you dish out like, let's say it's just 15 shows in a row, maybe 2 off days, but if you're gonna constantly play those shows and then drive yourself after that, it's just not safe. So it's just a situation which is really bad at the moment. And I just hope that it gets better. And then on top of that, of course, we had the gas crisis with all those prices also going up. So it's quite messed up at the moment. But either way, in our case, we're trying to make the best of it anyways. So my approach to this just is that I will play everything I can get under the condition that I can cover the costs, right? And as long as it doesn't collide with any other like important scheduling or something, then of course we will play live because we have to and we want to.
Sure.
But like it just makes sense that right now, we just do it in a way that is sustainably, because we want to make another 2, another 3, another 10, even more records. So if I am in financial ruin, then it just won't work eventually. So
right. And speaking of you talked about your lineup. Obviously, it's a
Yeah.
much different lineup than the first album. And these guys, I don't know where you found. I mean, you talked about you found one guy in Tenerife and one guy, your singer. I think he's from England. Am I correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How did you end up getting these guys into the band? Because when you turn over a lineup in a band, it can really change a lot of things, either for the very good or it could be bad or it could be really good. And obviously, it turned out really good. And talk about putting together this lineup to make this record.
So it was a quite long process. In 2019, that was when we still had the old lineup, right? That was
Yeah.
three Dutch people, and then Martin, who founded the band originally, way back. And this ended up like disbanding due to several reasons, mainly because we wanted to get going, and most of the people weren't able to invest the amount of time that it actually needed to get somewhere. So, well, we decided to just disband it. And now in the end, I'm the only one from the original lineup left. But I went on to take the time that was COVID during that time, actually. So I had a lot of time to just look for new people. I took that time to really search properly and find musicians that, in my opinion, would suit the record perfectly. I actually found Craig on Fiverr, which was one of the more funny discoveries. I was searching for, I cannot tell you, months. And I was in touch with around 100 plus singers up to that point. And I was desperate. And then I sat in a living room with my friend. I was like, man, I just cannot find a singer that I like. There were many good ones, but no one great. So he told me, have you looked on Fiverr? And I was like, no. Fiverr is this like freelance platform. Do you know it?
I've never heard of it. No.
Yeah, it's quite big here in Europe. Apparently, American people don't tend to not hear of it so much. But anyways, it's like a freelance platform where people can put up their services. And he was there as a singer. So I literally went there and typed in metal singer. And then he was like among the first people that popped up. And I shot him an email, and since then we're working together. Really cool. And with Marcos from Tenerife, it was a little bit different. We knew each other for a long time. As you might know, Marcos is also ex-Rage. So I knew that he had left the band and was actually free to do something. So eventually I just shot him up and was like, hey, dude, what about it? And after a few days back and forth, we decided to also work together.
Sure.
So yeah, quite cool.
So let's talk about the cover of this record. I remember you were posting online that you had a few different variants, and then you went with this one. And the variants were cool. I mean, there were different versions of it. The one was a little darker, but this one was, a little bit different. Well, what made you go with this cover?
I think the variants that you saw, I think you saw the old, like one of the first versions that we had of the cover with the dark red.
Mm-hmm.
We also had a version which was like quite the finished one, but more dark. And this one I really loved. I almost even preferred it to that golden one. But in the end, I made the hard decision to actually go with the golden one because I think it's more uncommon. And as you can see right behind you, behind your left shoulder, there's another cover with the dark red flames and everything. And I think it's just way too common in the metal scene. So sure. I wanted to do something new, something like shiny. And while it's not reinventing the wheel, I think it's definitely more of an eye catcher than if I had went for this like dark red flame style.
Sure. Well, I got to be honest with you. the songs on this record, part of the reason it's as good as it is, they're very well written. And I mean, there's a lot of tracks on this record. And you know as far as writing these tracks, did you do a lot of this before you ended up getting these guys in the lineup, or did you do a lot of the songwriting once you figured out who was actually going to be on this record?
That's a good question, and I'm not sure I fully remember that. I started writing for Born from Fire right when we released the debut, so quite a long time. But I think that some of the first songs I started writing for the record didn't actually make it on there. Because I kind of changed the style from what I did on the first record a little bit, and tried to evolve it and make it more fit for what I imagine the band should sound like. And it was like kind of just a process throughout. I mean, I had a lot of time, right? I had 2 years to write everything,
right?
And then, of course, as soon as I knew who actually the members were, I mean, most crucially the singer, I started to write more with that in mind as well. But usually, I mean, musicians are musicians. When I write something, they can probably play it right. So it's just a different thing with the singer that, you have to make sure that it's some melodies that are in his range, but these are things that I can then work out with Craig together.
Right. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, Craig's a phenomenal singer. I mean, he really fits what this band is about, just vocally. And it was like there was some kind of magic on this record, because when I listened to this, it was really hard to like stop listening to it. And it just, everybody on the album fits perfectly. I mean, musical chemistry, it's not something you can buy. It's not something that it's not something that magically, you can force it to happen. I mean, it's happened. And I think that's a big reason for me why the record has turned out as great as it has.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, you're right. It's funny how things just develop when you work with different musicians. I know that I usually sit, like when I write, I sit alone in my studio here, and I'm on my own, because I usually tend to work best like that. But some of the songs, like I'm Alive, I wrote this one. That's the only song actually where I wrote with another person. I wrote this one with my bass player together. We did it downstairs in the living room in like a day on like an acoustic bass and an acoustic guitar, and then started tracking it. And it's funny to see how that one turned out, because it's like it's more like old school, I would say. But it's fun to see how, music turns out when you start working with different approaches and different people. And sometimes that's exactly what it needs to break out of like a rut or something as well.
Right. Well, I have to ask you, because, Kai Hansen is your dad. Obviously, he's a pretty legendary guitar player in the realm of power metal. And, growing up, playing guitar, I mean, how much of an influence did he have on you? When you started playing and where you are now?
I think that's really hard to tell. First of all, I think parents always have like a passive influence on the kids, right?
Yeah.
That's just something that's given. And I never felt so actively inspired by my father until I very, very, very late fully realized what he's actually doing. And I'm still realizing that more and more. Because I always saw him like as, well, he's my dad, he's doing music and it's really cool what he's doing, but I never fully grasped the extent of it, like that there's millions of people that listen to his records, to his songs, that yeah, I actually love him. And this is something that came very late for me. And I think in my early years, he never really pushed me to go any musical direction or any direction at all, actually. So it was always just like a passive encouragement, like him leaving guitars around the house. So if I want to, I can pick one up and play.
Yeah.
It's quite funny. But then when I was 15, that's when I actually actively started to want to play electric guitar. And that's when I also asked him, hey, can you bring me some electric guitars? And like, yeah, sure. And that's when I started playing. And then the older I got, the more I got interested in how does the music business work? How does writing a song work? But I do still, and I always have asked him for advice. But if there's one thing that will surprise some people, he's not always right. He's right very often. I mean, he's surprisingly often he is right. But yeah, I mean, I write a different style in a way than he does. So I make different decisions that he does. But it's super fun because we've been writing some things together as well. And these turn out great every time. So
yeah,
that's cool to see. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was something I was going to bring up. Nothing that on this album reminds me of Gamma Ray, or it doesn't really remind me of Helloween for that matter. It's, you have your own sound, that, because what happens is, and especially with power metal bands, they try to sort of copy those bands. You hear a lot of them where it's like they try to copy those bands. They usually try to copy old Helloween stuff, or they will copy Gamma Ray, but Induction sounds nothing like either band. Not at all. It's just you have a completely different sound. And
that's hilarious, because just the other day I've seen a review of like angry German fat metalhead guy. And it was hilarious because he started out with the record like, yeah, not too bad, but then he's totally started shitting on it, like, yeah, it's just a carbon copy of the Gamma Ray stuff. Like, what? This is like, no, you didn't even listen to it then. So
it sounds nothing. It sounds nothing like Gamma Ray, like at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even think. I was thinking in my head just a second ago, is there anything on this record that sounds like either that or Helloween? And honestly, no. I mean, you have one song title that's a Helloween song title. That's probably a coincidence. That's pretty much that is. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, it even used to be called differently. Give Me the Night was the original title.
Yeah,
but that got changed. And I'm also trying to think right now, because I have definitely in my life taken advice and learned things about songwriting from my dad, and that is mainly, it's about emotion and expressing yourself. And I now at this point, I sometimes know that what some people consider being silly or weird to do in a song is very often like the thing that expresses the emotion in a better way, and that's always what my dad used to do, and I definitely took that over into my songwriting as well. I don't know if silly is the right term, but
no, it kind of. I mean, Helloween has songs like that. Even the albums your dad.
Well, that's true. It's very
they
silly.
They do that all the time. It's. Yeah. I get what you're saying though, because the thing is, it's funny. I think Peter told me that you played a solo on the Iron Saber, the Reforged album, and it was actually on one of your dad's songs, which I thought was cool. Talk about doing that. When you were asked to play that, because I remember when that song came out, your dad wrote it. It was on, I think it was Deadly Sleep, if I can remember correctly. And
exactly. Yes.
You played one of your dad's solos, so that had to be an interesting fun thing.
I'm just noticing that there's a sun. Wait, okay. So this was, I do do a lot of guest soloing and all this kind of stuff. Just yesterday, I recorded another thing. And when Pete asked me if I wanted to do it, I was on board immediately. So I had a lot of fun writing my version of the solo, and I even wrote like an additional solo, I think, or a fully new one. I don't even remember, but that was super fun. I prepared it at home, practiced it, and then just went over to Pete, who lives like 10 minutes away from me.
Yeah.
And I recorded it at his place, and yeah, we just hung out a bit. So super cool. And I'm always happy to do these kind of things. It's just fun to me to write, and always a different challenge to make something that suits the song the best. Because when people contact me for guest work, they contact me with all kinds of different things, right? Or different songs. So it's interesting to like put my style into the context of the song.
Right. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was cool. But you have done some guest solos. I think I think I'm correct in this, but I think you played on one of the Helloween songs on the last album. Did you not?
Yes, I did.
That's right. On Skyfall. Yeah. I saw that
on Skyfall. Yeah. This one, I mean, a lot of old solos that I did, I cannot bear anymore because, well, but that's a good thing, because that means I have gotten much better since I wrote them and would do things differently now. But there's actually a Spotify playlist with all my features. Let me just pull that up. So because I don't even remember where I've been everywhere. All right, there we go. So I did. I've been on Marius Danielsen, Legend of Valley Doom, if you know that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I did something with Heavy Zorus. They had this like amazing, massive 100 artist song where that was crazy, and it's still crazy for me to be next to people like Kiko Loureiro on that track. They put like 100 artists, like singers and guitarists on that track to do like a massive collab. Then there's been Skyfall, where I had a solo, and Future Calls from North Tail, our good friends.
Yeah, very good band, by the way.
Yeah, and then there's some other ones, and more coming. But yeah, some of the best ones I like to post on my playlist there.
So are you a fan? Some bands really hate Spotify. Some people embrace it. What is your opinion?
Personally, I love the hell out of Spotify. And I'll tell you why. As a consumer, right? As a consumer, I love Spotify because I've discovered so many amazing bands due to that. Mm-hmm. And that's not something that should be taken lightly, because so many of the bands that I actually listen to actively nowadays, I would have never listened to if it weren't for Spotify. So one of the positive things that is there to say about it is that you discover a lot of things,
Sure.
And yeah, I think that's just something where the world needs to adapt a bit, because it's more about everyone has access to more. So ultimately there's more like streams and everything, but the days where there's like diehard fans, buying a CD without having listened to it, and then on the way back home they look through the booklet like, oh, exciting, and then when they're at home they finally listen to it and they're like, oh, that's cool. Those days are over, obviously. And I think with the world that we live in now, Spotify is a really great thing to help bands get a lot more reach and a lot of new fans. which ultimately then will come to the live shows. Because that's the goal, you want to
Sure.
have people come to the live shows and, have fun with you.
Yeah. It's interesting. It has changed because, now everything that I get, like promos it's all electronic now, which is kind of better because, I used to not like walking into a room and having, 20 packages I got to open up with a CD in it. It's a lot easier to hear what these bands sound like. And then I could say, okay, if I really like this, I can go buy their album. And then I can go and, like my son, he's 16 and he's like, and that's the big thing now is vinyl. That's what the rage. And that's what he has Spotify, but he will go out and buy records. It's funny. He doesn't buy CDs. He buys vinyl. And if he wants to listen to it digitally, he goes in a Spotify, which I think it's interesting how the younger generation of people do things, as compared to my first, it's funny. The first ever MP3 I ever downloaded, there was no high-speed internet. It was Virgin Records in Germany sending me a new Blind Guardian song off of Nightfall Middle Earth. It took 45 minutes to download it. They wanted to send me in that.
And what's that? That's like 4 kilobyte, maybe. That's nothing.
4 megabytes. Now it's
4 megabyte. Yeah,
it's like 3 seconds, and it's there. But that's how far back I go. And it's funny now how things are delivered, these days, and how bands are promoted these days. And it's cool because I think that in some sense, I think the only thing people really don't care about, aren't a fan of when it comes to Spotify, is how it pays bands. But the medium itself, it's almost like your custom radio station. That's really what it reminds me.
I think there are some directions that Spotify could go to make it more fair to artists. But I don't think they're going to do that because, well, they definitely could pay more and would still be totally fine. I mean, they make so much money, but obviously it's a business where they act in their interest. The artists, they're the product, and that's the part that I don't like about Spotify.
Sure.
Music just becomes, it always has been, but music is like a product, and for them, all these artists and the quantity of artists, that's very important. The quantity of artists that is out there just serves them to, make all that money. And I do hope that eventually there's going to be some ways to make it more sustainable for artists, because the way it is right now, building a band in the music business is extremely like a insanely huge investment, as compared to building like a business where you can, invest your like $30,000 and then you can sell your first product, so you have income. With a band like that, it's consistently 30,000 per record if you want to have a good quality, 30,000 per record, and then you sell some products. But then it's very hard. And I do hope that streaming services somehow come around to making it a bit more sustainable for artists.
Sure. And you have the music. I mean, you're a newer band, and you went on tour. And talk about your tour. What was, it's always harder nowadays for a newer band to really kind of break out and make a name for themselves. And, how do these shows go for you? And do you feel you have an audience that's starting to, because here's the thing, everybody that I know that has heard you guys, I haven't heard a bad thing. Not one bad thing has been said. I get people, when I put that post up about, and I got the CD about you guys, I was getting messages like, these guys are great. Like, they were sending it to my page actually. And it's like, everybody seems to really gravitate to this music that you guys have written. And when you go out on tour, what's the reception been like, being a newer band like yourselves?
It's been amazing. What can I say? This last run that we did with Sirius Black and Skeleton has been phenomenal. Every time after the show, there was people that came to us and were like, "Dude, you killed it." People were actually blown away by our presence and the fun we had on stage. And that's again that's the key word. We're on stage and we have fun. We don't go there to shred our ass off and be super precise with everything. But
Right.
we practice the songs, we play them well, and we interact. We have fun with the audience, and every night we go on stage to party, basically. It's something that people really enjoy, and I think people go to a concert to, well, not only enjoy the music but really interact with the artists and forget about this daily shit for the day.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm super happy to know that even on the first tour that we did with the lineup, we already had such a great reception, and that our performance really finds. You know what I'm trying to say? I don't know how to say it
Yeah.
right now. Yeah.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think that, when I hear a record like this, this is the type of album that a band who has been, that you would hear that a band who's been around a long time would put out. I mean, this is the first album with this lineup, and it's the second album the band has done. And to be as far musically as you are is pretty awesome. And it's not very common. I could tell you that I'll have bands send me albums over the course of, say, the last 10, 15 years. And then suddenly they'll send me the third or fourth release. And it's like, there you go. It's there.
Yeah.
And you guys have done this on the second record. I mean, the first album was good. Don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
this one, it just feels different. And the songwriting is just a lot better, in my opinion.
I'll tell you why. It's because I wrote all the songs on this album. No, but in all honesty, I heard that as well a few times now, and I always think when I hear bands first things they try out and everything, it's always very hard for me because I think, well, do you really believe this is the standard that it should be? And I think either a lot of people are have lower standards, or they don't care or something, or they don't realize how it can or should sound. And that's always something I aim for. And, don't get me wrong, when I started out, I was 15 years old and I had my first band, and what I produced and wrote there was awful. It was genuinely awful. And it's just the process of people getting better. And maybe it's because people start putting out things earlier, they record their demos earlier than they should. But somehow, I don't know, I always felt well, here's what I made, and then here's the quality of all those big records. I'm not there, so what's the point? If I want to make it in the industry, then I have to ensure that it's a good quality and the standard that people nowadays expect. At least I think personally, for me, that's a record that's more fun to listen to.
Sure.
I don't mind if the mix isn't perfect by all means. Mixing shouldn't be the main aspect to any song, but a good mix definitely adds a lot to the experience, I think. So.
Well, the saying goes that a good mix can't hide bad playing and can't hide mistakes. It's just how it is. And
I guess that's true. Yeah.
I mean, for you, it sounds like, here's what happens with a lot of people create, and it's not just music. It's anybody that's in a creative aspect. It goes on in photography. It goes on in a lot of things where what happens is people don't want to be honest with themselves. They want to believe that, hey, what I'm putting out is amazing. And then all of their friends are going to tell them it's great. But then,
Yeah.
what happens is they don't want to take that time to compare themselves to somebody that's another artist or another band, compare the quality of what they're doing to that. And it sounds like you have done that. And that is why this record has turned out so well, because you realize, okay, it's got to be this good. It has to, you have a standard that you set that's pretty high. And not many people do that. So I think part of that is, you set a pretty high standard of how it should sound. And it obviously, I mean, there's really not much to say about it, aside from the album sounds pretty amazing, but again, you made a good point. The mix isn't the only thing, and mixing can't hide bad songwriting and it can't hide mistakes. And I don't see a flaw in this record at all. Like at all.
I mean, that's and I don't want anyone to get me wrong on this. I would still encourage all like young musicians or old musicians. I don't care for that matter, but always like do what you love and do it with excitement, and even if it's not up to the standard, like that doesn't mean anything as long as you like enjoy it. It starts to matter when you want to be like commercially viable and actually go somewhere with the music. I believe, anyways, it's just my opinion on that take. But it's like a whole process, and you should, of course, not hesitate to put anything out or show anything to anyone before it's on that standard, because it's just not going to be on that standard. And a part of like evolving as a musician just is getting feedback and talking about your music with people that you love and people that you don't love. And so definitely record yourself. And even if it doesn't sound great, share it and see what people think. Because as you said, songwriting doesn't hide a good mix doesn't hide bad songwriting that way. So,
yep.
Yeah.
Well, hey man, I'll have to be honest with you. We're gonna probably end it off here, but I want to say a couple things for you before I ask my last question. I love this record. I believe in this band and the music that you were doing, and you are always welcome. Anytime you have something going on, you have something coming out, you're always welcome on this show. I mean, I am somebody that likes to embrace a lot of artists that are very good and really haven't had a lot of exposure yet. And really for me, for this band, it's a matter of exposure. It's a matter of getting the name and the music out there, which can be difficult. But at the same time, you guys are one of these bands that, I sometimes run into that have one or two albums out that you're like, damn, it's like, I really believe in what you're doing. And I personally think that you guys have a pretty good future ahead of you if you keep going the way that you're going, in my opinion. So that's what I think. And, I guess my last question for you before we hit end on the recording is, any last words for any fans checking out this interview?
Well, first of all, thank you for listening. In case you don't know us yet, well, now you have a really good reason to listen to the record. In case you do know us already, then thank you so much for, listening to the music and supporting it. But yeah, I can't wait to see what the next years bring. And obviously, I'm hoping to go down to the States and tour the world and meet all of the people. So that's going to be the most exciting part of the next few years for me. And we'll keep going. I'm still writing songs, and I want to thank everyone for the great support. That's it, I think.